All right, thanks everyone for coming, and thanks to Carl and American Angler for putting this on. So today we're gonna be talking about the basics of fluke fishing off the surf. A lot of you guys might know a lot of this stuff already, but I always find it helpful to go back to the basics, and sometimes you'll learn something new. My goal for today is that everyone here take at least one thing away with them that they learn that's new. Before we get into it, a little bit about me. So I'm Sam, by the way, again, also known as Salty Sam on YouTube and Instagram. I started my YouTube channel back in the end of 2023, so going on almost 2 years at this point. But my day job is I work in marketing. I do graphic design, I do video work, and then my passion outside of work is fishing. So I figured what better way to bring the two of them together by making a YouTube channel. And the goal for my channel is basically to make fishing approachable for people who are brand new to it, to make it easy to understand and get into. I think it's an amazing hobby. It's done great things for my life. Could do great things for many other people's lives too. So, and also to encourage people who have fished for a long time to always stay learning, always be learning something new, because I think that's a crucial aspect of fishing. And then just a little bit about my favorite species, obviously fluke, what we're gonna be talking about today. Tautog or blackfish, that's definitely up there as one of my favorite. They put up an amazing fight and they taste incredible too. If anyone's ever eaten blackfish, you'll know they taste awesome. And then striper, when I can catch them, I'm not the best striper fisherman. I had a terrible spring this year, and spring's usually my favorite time to striper fish. So when I can catch them, they're a blast. All right, so something I like to say is that it's always important to know about the fish before you catch them. If you can get inside the fish's mind, you're more likely to think how they think and then be able to find them better. So we're gonna go over some biology and some what I like to call flatty facts. Fluke are also known as like flatfish, they're flatties. So I don't know, I thought that was clever, but hard to see on this side of the screen, but there's a picture of a summer flounder and a winter flounder. Now there's a difference between the two of them. A fluke is a summer flounder. The way to tell the difference essentially is that this is a summer flounder, this is a fluke. If you were to hold them up and this is their dorsal fin, is that longer fin on the top. If their dorsal fin is facing up, a fluke's face is on the left side of its body. On a winter flounder, it's on the right side of their body. So that's how you can kind of tell the difference. Also, there's some coloration differences between the two. Fluke are generally a little lighter, and then those winter flounder can be darker. The summer flounder, their scientific name is Paralictus dentatus. And you hear like the dent part, dental. Basically what it roughly translates to is toothed fish that lays on its side. So I don't know, not very creative with the scientific names, but fluke are flat, so there's two sides to the fish. There's an ocular side, which has their eyes and the coloration, and then there's a blind side, which doesn't have their eyes and has a white coloration. So when fluke are first born, their eyes are actually on both sides of their body, and then as they grow older, the eyes start to migrate to the top side, that ocular side. They also have these things called chromatic pores, and it helps them change color based on where their surroundings. So they're kind of like the chameleons of the sea. They like to blend in with where they're at because it helps them feed and helps them ambush their prey. So if you're seeing a lighter color fluke, typically those are found in like the sandier environments, and then a darker color fluke, typically a muddier bottom. So usually if you're catching fluke in the bay, sometimes they're a little darker because that's that muddy bottom, and then you're catching them off the surf, they're gonna be a little lighter because that's that sandy bottom. So they're just trying to match their surroundings. And then they reach maturity by around 2, and at 3 they're around 15 inches. So you catch a 15-inch fluke off the surf, the fish probably is 15 years old. Or I'm sorry, you catch a 15-inch fluke off the surf, it's probably around 3 years old. The females are generally larger than the males, and fluke on the high end can live up to 15 to 17 years. So their habitat, this is a very important part about fluke, but they're found anywhere from Nova Scotia, Canada, all the way down to Florida, but they're predominantly found in the Massachusetts, North Carolina range, and in New Jersey, we have a lot of fluke. But they live anywhere from 1 foot of water to 500 feet of water. I've literally walked into the surf before and have stepped on a fluke, so they're right there, they're sitting at the lip of the beach, and then they're hanging out all the way 500 feet plus of water offshore in the wintertime. So they can be found kind of anywhere, bays, Rex reefs, inlets, creeks, and then of course what we're talking about today, the surf. So feeding, another very important part about fluke is how they feed, because this is kind of going to give you an indication of like when you're catching them, how they're reacting to your baits. So they feed mostly during the daylight hours, and their diet consists of baitfish and crustaceans. They're also opportunistic feeders, so whatever's swimming by them, they're going to chomp on. how they operate, they're ambush predators. So they lay on the bottom of the surf or the ocean floor, and then they lay with their head into the current. And when whatever comes by them, they're gonna come off the bottom and then grab that bait fish, crustacean, whatever's going by them. So they are aggressive, and they will attack your bait, and you'll feel they fight really well, no matter kind of what their size, especially if you're fishing with light tackle. They are a fun fish to catch. And then last part about my little flatty facts section, but fluke do migrate. This is important to know because you can kind of figure out where they're gonna be at what time of the year. Fluke in the wintertime are offshore. So in the spring, around March, they start to head back inshore, and they go into those back bays where there's more warm water and the bait fish and their food is hanging out. Striper do kind of a similar thing, but they migrate more up the coast. Fluke are coming from offshore. So then as that back bay water starts to heat up in around July, those fluke are going out the inlets in waves. So they're heading out of the inlets and then going all along the surf. And this is why July is typically, this is my favorite time. July and August, my favorite time to fish for fluke. This is kind of like the brunt of surf fishing for fluke. August, September, they're getting ready to go back offshore for the winter. So they're schooling up and feeding along the wrecks and beaches. And again, getting ready to head out. So they're feeding, getting ready for their wintering grounds. In August, generally this is when, from what people have told me and kind of my own experience too, you kind of catch your biggest fluke around August, September, especially if you're taking a boat out. A lot of times I like to take party boats out in August and get on the fish. And then the fishing season actually ends in September. So, and then again, fall, winter, they head back offshore and that's where they spawn. And then springtime rolls around, they do the exact same thing and just repeat the pattern year after year. All right, so now we're gonna get into the meat of the talk, which is kind of the how to fish for fluke. And we're gonna start out with gear. So one reason why I really love fluke is it doesn't require a lot of gear. Everything is very light. And if you're a freshwater fisherman, you can even take some of your freshwater gear that you use for, say, like largemouth bass and use it for fluke. So we're gonna start out with rods. You don't really need super long rods to be fishing off the surf. You might think, oh, I gotta cast my lure, my rig, you know, all the way to England, but not usually the case with fluke. Again, they can be sitting right at your feet, basically. So a couple yards out really is gonna be all you need to cast. So I've got this 7-foot rod here. This is the Fisherman's Headquarters shop rod, actually. And it's rated for, it's a 7-foot rod, medium rated, and it's 1/4 to 1 ounce. So most of the time when I'm fishing for fluke off the surf, my lures or weights are generally in the 1/4 ounce to 1 ounce range. I'm really not going over an ounce if I don't have to. I got a 1/4 ounce jig on here right now. I fished it this morning off the surf and you know, it did just fine. It may seem really light, but again, you don't really need that much fishing for fluke. And Carl actually, I don't know if you want to talk about your rod here, but
you pick it up.
This thing is definitely a more expensive rod than what I've got here, but super light. And because you're walking around, fluke, you're gonna be walking up and down the surf constantly. You want something light, you're gonna be casting this thing all day. You got a heavy rod and reel setup, you're gonna get tired pretty quickly. So something really light like this is a nice rod and reel setup, you know, goes a long way. So then in terms of reels, I have this Penn Battle 3 DX. It's a 3,000 size reel. So you can go 3,000, 4,000 size. I think that's generally a good range. I like the 3,000. It's small, again, it's light, and can keep you going all day. You don't need a huge spool of line because again, you're not launching your baits out that far. Everything's pretty close in terms of where you're fishing. And then I load this up with 20-pound braid. I personally don't, I know it's angler to angler, but I don't think braid color matters that much. I always like to go with blue because I think it looks cool. But you're usually always using a clear monofilament or fluorocarbon leader line when you're fishing for fluke. So, you know, this is what the fluke are gonna see, not so much the blue or the green, whatever you choose. Yeah.
What's pound leader do you use?
Usually I'm using 20 or 30 pound leader. Yeah. Fluke, you can even, I've seen people on YouTube, they'll go down to a 10 pound, 8 pound. You never know if you're gonna catch like a bluefish or striped bass off the surf. So I don't like to go down in that range too much, but you definitely can, like it's possible. In terms of tackle bags, boxes, tools, stuff you might need, this is my setup that I have going. I switched to this last year. I used to carry around this gigantic backpack with like all my rigs and all my bait stuff and all my striper and bluefish, and it was just so heavy. again, Fluke, you're on the move. You're constantly moving, finding different spots, finding where the Fluke are. So I find this hip bag to be really helpful, keeping things light. In terms of what I've got in this, again, I want to emphasize a million times tonight, you don't need a lot to fluke fish. It's very easy. This is a double-sided tackle box. This is all I need for fluke. I use this, all summer long. Basically what I've got in here, and I can pass this around too, bucktails, jig heads. I've got some metals in here too, again, just in case bluefish are swimming around. I want to target some bluefish. They love those metals. And then a couple sinkers, more jig heads, and then barrel swivels. That's literally it. So yeah, that's all I'm using in terms of tackle. And then in terms of extraneous stuff that I have in here, good gear to have. This is my gulp container. It was just like a jar I had lying around, some plastic jar. But gulp is kind of like the quintessential fluke bait, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. This stuff stinks. It's got this like juice that is a special thing that gulp created. But they sit in this at all times. I have all my different types in here, and it's just easy access for me to grab. And don't leave the gulp bait leaking in your truck overnight. Yeah, because that happened to me recently. It stinks. So yeah, a couple other things I got in here. This is a stringer. This is, if you catch a keeper fluke and you want to bring it home, you put this little notch end through the gills, and then you could
catch a keeper or more.
True. Yeah, you can load up as many fish. I mean, 3 fish we'll talk about later. 3 fish is the, yeah. But you could either tie this to your belt, carry it around with you. You can put the fish in the surf while you're fishing, keep it in that water, but it basically just keeps them alive so that you don't have to kill them right away, and that keeps that fish fresher. These are braid scissors. This is usually what I use to cut and switch out on my lures, and if I need to. Yeah, they've got this little ridge on it here, so you pull the braid through there, just cut it, and it's a lot easier than sometimes normal scissors. This is a fish gripper. I just keep this on my belt. This is not necessary for fluke. I'll tell you how to hold fluke later, but sometimes, again, they do have teeth, and if you're, say, with someone that doesn't want to hold the fish or something, you basically put this in their jaw, clamp it down, you hold the fish like that. Yeah, get a picture with it. Especially, again, you get bluefish. Bluefish are nasty, they got teeth. Always good to have these on you. This is kind of like, if there's anything you take away from this, having a tape measure, pretty much essential. If you plan on keeping any fluke, if you plan on taking some home, you wanna make sure you're within legal regulations. So I like this one. You can literally get them at a craft store, little tiny one, $1. This is probably way more money than it needs to be. Rapala. I like these because this sits on the sand, nice and flat, and then you can get a good measurement that way. So, retracts. I can keep it on this little carabiner I have. Last thing, pair of pliers. Removing hooks, again, I keep saying it, fluke have teeth. You want to dig down in there, get a hook out. Pliers are essential to have. You can cut line with it. You can do a whole lot of things with some pliers. So, pretty easy. Oh, one more thing. I don't have it on me, but a knife. If you want to bleed out a fish, a lot of times if you catch a keeper fluke, you bleed the fish out before you bring it home. Gets that blood out of the meat, makes the fish taste a little better. Now we're going to move on to some rigs and lures. So there's 2 main ways that I like to approach fluke fishing. And the first way is with this dropper rig, also known as a chicken rig. I meant to tie one up for this, but I didn't get enough time. Essentially, and I hope you guys can see this, but this is the leader line. So usually for this, I use a 30-pound monofilament leader. And down here, you tie a little dropper loop, and then you attach a 3/0 to a 6/0 bait holder hook. So on the smaller end is what I usually go for. You can use a smaller profile gulp. So a 3/0, usually I'm using one of these little guys. This actually has the tail bit off from a fluke. I'm using one of these small little ones. You catch a lot of shorts with this.
That's a 4-inch gulp?
This is a 4-inch, yeah. But you can also catch big keepers, caught plenty of keepers off the 4-inch. And then you go with a bigger, like a 6/0 bait holder hook. You can use one of these bigger 6-inch at the bottom. You got a bank sinker, so you got one of these. How you fish it, and again, there's another video of this coming up, but slowly reel it. You cast it out, slowly reel it all the way back to your feet, and then you can give it a couple twitches here and there. Jig the rod a little bit, get some movement on that, and then the fish are either, I think Carl mentioned this before actually, smaller ones gonna kind of like tap on it, larger one is just gonna come grab that hook, and then you're gonna feel that weight on the other end. You set the hook, reel it in, do the whole process. But why I like these is you can cast these a mile. Not that you have to, but if you've got a sandbar way out and the trough is pretty big in front of you, which we'll talk about later, you can launch these to the other end and then reel it back. And it can also, because there's a weight on the end, be used in much more conditions than lighter jigging setups. So I'm gonna play this video real quick. This is just gonna show you how to tie this up. What you'll need for this rig is 20 or 30 pound leader line, a 3/0 to 6/0 bait holder hook, barrel swivel, and a bank sinker. Pull out a decent amount of line and make a loop. Then tie a surgeon's loop. Make a loop around your finger and wrap the loop you're holding through the new loop twice. Pull tight, and now you've got a loop for your sinker. A few inches up, you're going to create a dropper loop with a twist to keep the hook out and away from the rest of the rig. Take both sides of the line and twist in opposite directions while pushing together. Every few twists, gently pull the line apart and continue twisting to ensure a tight twist. Now you're ready to tie the dropper loop. Fold the two ends of the line at the base of the twist over each other while leaving an opening. Wrap the lines around themselves up to 5 times while maintaining the opening in the middle. Take the twisted portion and string it through the opening. Pull tight and make sure the knot is cinched down. About a foot up, cut the line and add your swivel. At the bottom, push the loop through the eye of the sinker, wrap it around the sinker, and pull tight. Lastly, add the hook by pushing the twisted dropper loop through the eye of the hook, wrapping it around the hook, and pulling it tight. In the water, the weight skips along the bottom and the gulp sits above the ocean floor, providing enticing action for the fluke to strike. If you could see, the little gulp is basically sitting like a couple inches to feet above the bottom of the ocean floor, and that's what, like what I was saying before about how those fluke are pretty aggressive. They'll come up and they'll grab that hook. So this is just me catching on this rig. Basically, like I said, you're reeling it nice and slow. Why I like this too is like, it doesn't really require a lot. It's not like very technical. It's pretty simple. And really, this is like the #1 thing I go to. I just fish this rig all the time. There we go, there's another fish. Some good head shakes on this guy. This is the jig head or bucktail setup. And again, when I passed around that thing, you may have seen those like little hairy jigs in there, and then kind of the regular jigs, which I actually have on here. This little jig right here. You throw a gulp on there, one of these, and then basically with this style on the left here, how I'm fishing this is I'm doing like casting out, doing a jig, reeling in the slack of the line, and then start to feel that tension on the line again. Jig, jig, reel in that slack, jig, jig, and then you're doing that all the way back. Oh, finally. Oh, this took at least like 2 hours to get. Ooh, that's a good sized fish too. So this fish right here is just 18 inches, but I'm gonna throw him back. Maybe we'll get another keeper on the board. Let's see. With these plain jig heads, I've been using these 6-inch jerk shads, one of these guys, and It's been super effective. Honestly, this has been my favorite way in the last year of catching them. You can catch some big fish on this guy, and it's pretty simple to fish too. Yeah, so I also forgot to mention too, in terms of gulp, some of my favorite colors, you may have noticed, it's really a lot of white, a lot of pink shine, which is a pink and a white combination, a lot of pink, and then there's some chartreuse in there. That's really all I use. There's a zillion gulp colors out there.
So popular 5 years ago.
Yeah, chartreuse is killer, especially if it's like kind of a cloudy, muddy water day out. It stands out in the water a lot more. With a bucktail, there's many different ways to fish a bucktail. But the way I like to do it, it's actually called, like, I don't know if anyone's heard of John Skinner here. He kind of popularized, yeah, he kind of popularized this bucktailing for fluke. And again, I'll have videos for all this in a second, but he kind of does a constant jigging motion, slowly reels, and then what's happening is that these jigs and these bucktails, they're kind of like gliding along the bottom where those fluke are sitting, and then when you're giving it that action, it just entices them. You've got one of these on there, so the tail's going, you've got some extra action on there. Everything loves bucktails. Actually, I think it was like the Navy or something. They used to give a fishing kit to all their soldiers, and the bucktail was like the one lure that they had in there because it catches, again, like Carl said, catches everything. But this is a bucktail right here. You put that on, you put this on the bottom of your leader line, and then up a little ways you can attach another hook. Usually a smaller hook, you throw a smaller gulp on there, and just gives you another chance at catching fish. More hooks on there, the more chances of fish you have. But sometimes it also imitates, when these two things are swimming along, imitates two bait fish like following each other. So sometimes it makes the presentation look a little more enticing for the fish. But I'll play this right here. Again, what I'm doing with this is I'm doing this constant jigging motion rather than like the jig, reel in, jig. And this fish actually ends up hitting the teaser, so it hits that smaller hook. Are we spitting up sand fleas? This fish just spit those out. So we hit the teaser. You know, like we said before, when you're fishing either of these setups, you want to make sure you're reeling all the way back to your feet, because like Carl mentioned before, those fish are literally going to be sitting at your feet sometimes, and I've caught keepers basically right at my feet. They love to just sit right on the lip of the beach and then wait for something to come by, whether bait fish or whatever gets washed up in the lip of the surf. So if you're reeling back prematurely, you're going to be missing kind of maybe one of the best bites that's out there. So in terms of like tides and times, this is pretty crucial when it comes to fishing. But with fluke, I think why I love fluke so much is it is generally pretty easy, and they are kind of always out there. With most fish, 2 hours before and after high tide seem to be the most productive. But I find that you can catch fluke at pretty much any tide and any time of day. My personal opinion is that location for fluke matters more than the time of day and the tide. You can go out high noon and the sun's beating down. If you're in a good spot, you'll be on them. But they do tend to feed more, you know, early morning, late afternoon. I like to say that you'll get the most bites before the beach goers arrive at the beach in the summer, and then as they're kind of leaving the beach, that's when the fluke bite will turn on again. But based on the location part, we're now going to talk about where to find fluke and how to read the beach. And this is kind of what I find to be the most difficult part of surf fishing. Learning how to read the beach can take some practice. So I'm going to try to go through it and give the most information possible. But again, if any questions come up, let me know. So scouting structure ahead of your trip is probably the most important part. If you can find good spots before you get out there, you're saving yourself a lot of time and probably getting on a lot more fish. So when you're scouting structure, low tide is generally the best time to find the bottom structure. So when that tide's out and the water's shallow, you can see all the sandbars, you can see the cuts, the lips of the beach. You can see where that deeper water is just by looking at the color. If it's a clear day, you know, you see there's some lighter water out there, that's probably a sandbar. You got some darker water, that's probably a deeper little pocket of water. Deeper pockets of water, perfect for fluke fishing. So what you're mainly looking for is this kind of like fish highway. And this is where the fish come in and out close to the beach. So on the outer sandbars, you're gonna have a hole between the two sandbars, and that's called a cut. And the fish are gonna swim through that cut and through the trough, which is the area between the sandbar and the lip of the beach, and they're gonna be looking for bait fish in there. So the bait fish are close to shore, they're swimming through there and then trying to find fish. So if you can find these fish highways, you're boosting your opportunity to find fish. So we're gonna kind of go a little more in depth of this because I know this can be very confusing. This is what I'm talking about right here. You see where these waves are crashing? This is where the sandbar is. So there's those two sandbars, and the waves are gonna crash over that because that water is a little shallower. In between those sandbars is what's called a cut. And when you're looking at the water, you'll see the waves crashing, and then in between it, you'll see waves kind of just rolling through. They're not gonna really crash as much. They're just gonna be kind of floating along. So that's where that deeper pocket of water is. Then once you get kind of in front of you by where you're standing on the beach, there's a trough. And a trough is a deeper pocket of water that's in between the sandbar and yourself on the beach. So again, those fish are swimming through this cut, coming along this deeper little trough in front of you, and then they're either going out another cut on another side, or the cut turns into a sandbar and those bait fish are trapped and they're hanging out where that sandbar cuts off. So I'm gonna show you actually a little video here so you can see what I'm talking about a little better. I think it's a little easier to see when there's actual waves in the mix. In this clip, you can note the shallow water by the breaking waves. This sandbar extends out to here where these waves are breaking. Next to it, you won't notice any breaking waves, but instead waves rolling through until they hit the lip of the beach. This is the deeper water and a great spot to look for fish. To the right is another sandbar and a trough between it and the beach. This is the type of water you want to be casting in to find fluke. Yeah, so this is what's happening basically under the water. This is what that bottom is looking like. This is like a side angle. So when you see those waves cresting out a little ways, they're cresting and then they'll crash down, and they're crashing over the sandbar. And then when that bottom kind of like deepens out a little bit, those waves are gonna kind of reform, and then they're gonna roll their way through and then reform, start to crest again right at the lip of the beach. So when you're seeing that action, you're seeing wave crash, waves reform, and then waves crash again. That's how you know you're at a trough. And again, fluke are just sitting in that trough waiting to eat. So if you're at a trough, you're at a good location. I got one more video. I actually took this morning. This was at high tide, but keep note of where the waves are crashing initially, and then how they're rolling through, and then where they're crashing again. So you see those waves breaking out there, and then they start to reform, like they start to curl again, and they're rolling through. That's that deeper water. And then it crashes again on the beach.
Much harder to see at high tide.
Yeah, harder to see at high tide. So again, if you're scouting spots, go at low tide. You know, look at the tide chart, take note of it, and scout during that. So again, one of the more complex parts of fishing, the surf, but once you kind of get it down, then you're in business. Like you'll start finding fish a lot easier. And something I like to do too when I find a spot that I like to fish, if anyone has Google Maps on their phone or Apple Maps, whatever, I put a little pin in that spot so I know next time I go out to try that spot again.
Do the holes change?
Great question. Yes, they do. Especially when storms come through, that bottom structure is always changing. Sometimes more than others, but it's always good to like kind of rescout spots throughout the season, especially year to year. My spot that I fished pretty often last year is very different from this year. Especially they did beach replenishment on LBI too. Sometimes that can change, you know, the sand shifts around, things change. So it's important to always be checking your spots. So this is what is called fan casting. It's like one of those like kind of paper fans, the way this looks. But when I approach a spot, I walk up to it and then I start by casting pretty much like maybe a 45-degree angle to my left. And you're gonna cast basically along the lip of the beach, because again, those fish are sitting right there. So you give a cast that way, you know, whatever, reel in, jig in, whatever you're doing. And if you don't get a bite, you're gonna turn about like 15 degrees, say, to your right. You're gonna cast out again. And then you're gonna keep doing this until you work yourself basically around to the opposite lip of the beach. So you're facing the opposite way from when you started. The way I kind of do this is if I don't get any fish on that first pass, I'll maybe do this like 2 to 3 times. And then If nothing's happening, absolutely nothing's happening, I'm gonna move on to the next spot. So I'm gonna walk, say, 50 yards down the beach. I'm gonna find the next cut, the next trough, whatever kind of structure is there. And I'm just doing that as far as until I can find a fish. So you can walk all the way down, you can walk all the way back, whatever you wanna do. But fan casting is kind of the technique that you can employ to make sure you're covering the most ground and finding where those fish are hanging out.
What about current? When you fan cast it with the current?
With the current, so good question. This is how I look at it. So when I'm using that kind of like chicken rig, you can change your weight depending on what the current's doing. I don't find that it affects it too much if you're using the right weight, but when I'm jigging, this kind of goes out the window a little bit. When I'm using that light jig, I'm casting up current and then letting that thing drift down. Yeah, so.
You don't want it against the current.
Exactly, so I'm kind of like maybe using half of this fan on here. I'm using that left half. If the current's going this way, I'm just casting that way, letting it drip down this way.
It's a natural
Exactly.
drift at that point.
Yeah, and that's when this kind of light jig helps because it's a natural presentation. It's floating nicely along in that drift and that current. So I think this is all I got for you in terms of reading the beach. Again, staying mobile. This is the best course of action you can take when fishing for fluke. If you're not finding a bite, keep moving. Keep moving until you do. All right, so you got your rod and reel set up, you got your lures, you're finding the spot, and then you finally catch a fish. Now what do you do with it? So fluke, they're gonna come flapping out of the surf all crazy. Like, again, they're a flat fish, so sometimes they're hard to pick up. They have this like little indentation behind their gill. If you you take your thumb and your index finger, you hold right behind that gill, put them up against your body, they're gonna be so much easier to unhook. They're not gonna be flapping around like crazy. They are also pretty slippery fish. So unhook it, and if it's an undersized fish, throw that fish back. But if you catch a fish that's 18 inches or over, you can take home 3 of those fish. So the legal limit in New Jersey is 3 fish at 18 inches.
Beach State Park is 2 at 16.
That's a good point, actually. If you're fishing Island Beach State Park, it is different. Yeah, 2 at 16.
Weird thing.
So again, when you're measuring the fish, make sure your tape measure is flat on the ground, and you want to make sure that the fluke's mouth is closed. If you measure it open mouth, you might not get an accurate reading. Another thing too is if you're measuring the fluke over itself or like below it or above it, you might also not get an accurate reading. So make sure you're laying that fish down on top, bumping that mouth up against the front of the tape measure, and then you can pinch the tail too to get that accurate reading. Because Fish and Wildlife comes around and they catch you with a undersized fish, whoever catches you, you're kind of in big trouble. I don't think I think it's kind of a hefty fine. I don't know what it is, but it ain't cheap. So last thing I'll leave you with is cooking your catch. If you like to eat fluke, these are some of my favorite ways that I enjoy fluke. Fried fluke, my number one. If I'm going to a restaurant at the shore, I'm always getting fried fluke. I love fried fluke. It's fun, easy to make. Another recipe that I did last year was fluke with some chili lime seasoning. I got some chili lime seasoning at ShopRite. Just throw some of that on there, pair it with some rice, absolutely delicious. Fish tacos, fluke is kind of like it's like a mild white meat, so you can really use it for kind of any cooking application. It's very versatile. So fish tacos is a go-to. And then lastly, fluke franchise. If you ever had chicken franchise, other than texture difference, I don't think I could tell the difference between the way the fluke franchise tasted and the chicken franchise. It literally tasted like chicken. It was so good. I recommend it if you're into Italian food, you like that kind of stuff. Super easy to make. But I believe that's it. Thanks. Yeah.
Questions. I got a couple of them.
Sure. Yeah.
First of all, how do you fillet yours? Do you quarter it?
Good question. Yeah, I quarter it. So usually I cut it down the middle.
You can do it,
Yeah, I'll cut. Fluke have this like line down the middle. It's a lateral line. You slice it right down the middle, and then I basically just like go underneath the fillet and slowly chip away at it. Yeah.
How long is your mono line?
Usually about a foot. Yeah, you can do a lot longer. I don't know. I usually keep it pretty short for most of my applications. Yeah, okay, good question. So I would say this is all around. I would use this in any application, gulp all the time, for fluke at least. And then back bays, jig heads, I think are good because you can get away with pretty light stuff. It's different than when the surf's like ripping.
A lot tough on
Exactly. Yeah. In the bay, it's usually calm for the most part. Even on a rough day, like it's a lot calmer than the surf. So.
Jig heads in the bays.
Yeah, bucktails, jig heads. Yeah, I mean, you can use that chicken rig in the bay too. It works great. So yeah, I would say try jig heads. They're fun, honestly.